we have a body, a mind, and an intellect to navigate the world. If you have a strong intellect, you can guide a powerful mind to do some pretty incredible things. We back talking Daily Vedantic. Today's reflection on the Daily Vedantic is on what happens when the mind takes over. Well, Tarantino style, let's jump to the end real quick. When the mind takes over, it is the end. This is a phrase that my teacher Joseph, one of my teachers, Joseph, who's studied and taught Vedanta for nearly 30 years. He left St. Louis. He was studying at Washington University, one of the top universities in the world, and left at 19 to go study where, as he says, he wanted to go where people lived this wisdom and not just talked about it. As he was getting his degree in philosophy, he wanted to go where people were living it. And it's a beautiful story of him discovering Swami and this philosophy of Vedanta and just hearing it and it all clicking after surveying the landscape, going a mile wide but an inch deep, feeling like, all right, at 19, ready to go a mile deep in what sounds like the most, I'll say, interesting philosophy to him. And he was saying in an episode of Yoga for Your Intellect, that's what Vedanta is yoga for your intellect. And that is a podcast that he and I host together on this philosophy of Vedanta, but it's more of a conversational, long form podcast versus these short daily reflections. And in an episode, he was saying that when the mind takes over, it's the end. It was a kind of a throwaway phrase in the midst of a story that he was telling. And when I was re-listening to that episode, I was like, oh my God, what a knowledge bomb. When the mind takes over, it's the end. This can apply to a pursuit that you are on for 30 years. This can apply to a disagreement with a business partner, a spouse, or significant other. And it is so valuable to reflect on that when the mind takes over, it is the end. What does he mean by that? Well, my interpretation of what he means by that, given the backdrop of this philosophy, is that within our bodies, we have two inner equipments. This is perhaps the most central practical contribution of this philosophy, that we have a body, a mind, and an intellect to navigate the world. So within us, we have two inner equipments, a mind, which everyone knows. It's not going to be news to anyone, but for many of us, it might be the first time that we hear that there's another inner equipment called the intellect to guide us throughout the world. You can think about it kind of like the mind is like a river, and the intellect is the banks of that river. Modern psychology actually has started to just now discover this potential dual systems thinking is what it's called. System 1, system 2, or you may have heard the phrase thinking fast, thinking slow. There are potentially dual systems, according to the latest in psychology, that are working for your benefit. And the philosophy of Vedanta has been talking about this for 8,000 plus years, saying that there are two equipments, mind and an intellect. Mind, like a river, you could support entire civilizations with a great river. But if the banks are weak, it will flood the plainlands, flood the city, kill the livestock, destroy everything in its path. Or if you have strong banks to that river, you can build villages, cities, entire civilizations on the banks. If you have a strong intellect, you can guide a powerful mind to do some pretty incredible things. If you have a weak intellect, well, the mind runs the show. And there are moments, even if you have maybe this is the 100th episode you listen to. Maybe you've been studying Vedanta for a while, studying philosophy at large. Maybe you are quite the virtuous person, But even then, there are moments when we can recognize, oh shit, the mind is jumping into the driver's seat. A disagreement with your spouse then turns to a yelling match. And your intellect, which is the witness of what's happening with the body and the mind, that's by definition, if it's a witness, if it's observing it, then it's separate from it. The intellect can watch you. You might already know this feeling where you watch yourself doing what you don't want to do, what the higher you does not want to do. But the mind, the lower you, certainly does want to do it. That's why you're doing it. And the disagreement with a business partner or a spouse, significant other, is a perfect example where you can watch a weak intellect just get overtaken by the mind, where the mind just picks it up out of the driver's seat, throws it in the back seat and says, I'm driving now. The power of this phrase, when the mind takes over, it's the end, is that sometimes we think like, oh, this is going to be a relief when the mind takes over. I'm going to get this off my chest. I'm going to say what I want to say. I'm going to win this argument. And nothing is ever further from the truth when you say that thing you shouldn't have said. And you turn a 30-minute inconvenient argument or conversation into 2 weeks of rehabilitative work. Oh. That's why this phrase hit me so hard of when the mind takes over, it's the end. When the mind jumps in the driver's seat, when you see it getting close to the driver's seat and being like, okay, this intellect can't contain me anymore. I'm going to take over. Nothing good will come of it. And I think that's what was beautiful about this, the explicitness in this articulation. When the mind takes over, it's the end. In that scenario, it's over. You will say the thing you shouldn't say. You're going to do the thing that you shouldn't do. When the mind just starts to inch towards the driver's seat, saying, you know what, I'm going to have another drink. You know what, I'm going to fudge these numbers for this email for work because I really want that promotion. I really want X, Y, or Z to happen. And the mind is so damn savvy, just especially with a weak intellect. That river's powerful. And it says, you know what, we can make this work. Intellect, this is probably cool, right? Intellect's like, I don't know if the mind's like, no. Trust me, it's cool. I got this. And then flexes a little bit, gets bigger. It says, no. Sit back. We need this. We won't exist unless we say, we're going to get hurt unless we do this. Whatever justification, whatever spiritual bypass that the mind comes up with. Even recruiting the intellect, say, yeah, let's do this. When you notice that happen, that start to happen, like maybe I should say this. Well, maybe I should bring this out in this argument. Yeah, maybe I should have a third or fourth, fifth drink. An Uber would be pretty expensive. Maybe I should drive later. When you start to see that, the beginning of the mind trying to take over, that's when you can recognize, at least with this articulation and this beautiful knowledge bomb, unless you intervene, the very beginning of it taking over, it is the end. Good will not come out of the mind being in control. It never has, and it never will. It's not 50-50. It's not like, oh, this is a little bit of a gamble. It is assured destruction. For that moment, for that argument, for that evening, for even if you get home safely after the 5 drinks and the convincing that you should drive home, you've now set that neural pathway, the thought flow of, oh, I can drive when I'm a little drunk. And you've let the mind take over. And it might be 3 years, 6 years, 16 years down the road. But the end began when you let the mind take over. Saying that thing that destroys your spouse, that person that you love, that began the second your mind said, maybe we should say this, maybe we should bring this up. And it's beautifully horrific to just see that it's not just, oh, the mind's taken over and let's let them take the wheel for a little bit. But it's beautifully horrific to have the second part of the articulation. It is the end. The second the mind takes over, the second the river is more powerful than the banks, it is assured destruction. Now, you can't come back from it. It's not eternal destruction. But for that moment, for you, for those around you, it's not 50-50. It is the end. That's today's reflection on the Daily Vedantic. We'll see you next time.